What is up? You have landed on the Nook Podcast. My name is Stephen Murphy, and I am so honored to have you here today. I hope that this episode encourages you and challenges you to go deeper in your faith in Jesus. As we inch closer to Thanksgiving, I think we can have an awareness of being thankful, but taking it beyond that light awareness into something more tangible might not come so easy. I will be the first to raise my hand and admit, yeah, that's me. I can say that I'm grateful, but what am I doing to actually show it? Colossians 3:15 says to always be thankful. 3 words that make it sound so simple, and yet I think that we all get so caught up in taking care of ourselves that we rarely look around or look back to recognize those who have been so good to us and so good for us. So, in an effort to re-gear myself a bit, I reached out to one of my favorite teachers from high school. His name is Ron Hildreth, and I think that I can speak for just about anyone who took photography or yearbook classes from him. He left a lasting impression. I had a feeling going into this conversation that it would far exceed my expectations. This now retired teacher, mentor, and friend is still as gracious and engaging as he was when I first met him in 1980. I really think you will enjoy this. So, settle in for my conversation with Mr. Ron Hildreth. How long did you teach?
I taught for 32 years.
Oh, goodness.
And I started when I was 21. And I'm not going to tell you when I retired because then you'll know how old I am, if you can do the math.
No, because math was never
Yeah. I know.
Were you, in those 32 years, was it always photography, yearbook, everything that I experienced with you, or was there ever anything outside of that?
I started out, Mr. Huber called me up and says, I want you to work for me. I went, you do? Don't you remember you kicked me out of school twice? He goes, I want you to work for me. I want you to teach biology. So for the first 3 years, I taught biology. And after that, I saw that photography was a club. And the club was used to take pictures for the yearbook. And I thought, well, wait a minute. My buddy got me into photography at Glendale Community College, and I get a credit for that. And so if I can get a credit in college, why can't high school kids take it as an art class and get credit? So I went to the principal and I says, hey, I have this concept. What do you think? If you can get me a curriculum, we'll start it as an offering to see what happens. So I have to tell you, this goes way back. 1975, I was driving a bus in Yosemite, California, and I contacted Rochester, New York, which used to be Kodak, that nobody remembers anymore.
Right.
And they gave me all the material to write a curriculum. So I wrote the first curriculum, and the first year I taught 21 students photography, and the rest was biology. And the next year, it caught on so well that I went into a full-time photography. So to answer your question, for 27 years then, I taught photography. And of course, it was rewritten many times with advanced media productions, photo productions, independent studies, 101, 102, 103, whatever. And then I taught at Glendale Community College. I taught for 8 years advanced studies and photography there.
So were you able to see then, well, let me back up one step here. When did you retire?
I retired in 2003. Okay. I was 54 years old because I started so early teaching that I had all the points. You get 80 points and your age plus the points, you can retire.
Well, and then you must have been right there at the switch over as things were starting to go so crazy digital end of the 90s and into the early 2000s. Was that causing any kind of, were you able to keep up with stuff? Because it was changing so fast back then, from the good old days of when we would actually develop our own film to everything being on an SD card.
Yes. Matter of fact, as I sponsored the yearbook, you mentioned that, as you well know. And they said, man, we have this Apple IIG. Nobody knows how to use it. Do you want it, Ron? I'm like, yeah, give it to me. And then I asked for, I think it was a 20 or 40 megabyte external hard drive. I can't even fathom that. I mean, think of that, a 40 megabyte external hard drive.
Right.
We were starting things up with 5.25-inch floppies and then 3.5 floppies. And so I was staying with all of the technology. And when digital came along, I went to the principal. Now I was teaching at Ironwood High School at that time. And I said, okay, I want out of the dark room. It's becoming a thing of the past. I want to go 100% digital. Why, Ron? And I said, because it's instant feedback. Those kids can come in and they can give me their floppies or their Sony CD disc or, their compact flash. I can take it from my computer. I can send it to any of their computers. And then if they didn't get a good assignment, let's redo it today and bring it back tomorrow rather than developing film. So I told the principal, I asked the principal, I said, I want a white room with lots of power, a lot of electricity, and that's all I need. And they gave me that next year, 25 iMacs. They gave me a server, and then about 5,000, or maybe it was 500,000, a server that I could do, all kinds of things. So I made them do a journal. I was sponsoring yearbooks at the time, but they had to write a journal and they had to write all kinds of things. I gave them ideas. They had to text wrap around pictures and all of that. And at the end of the year, that journal was as important to them as the yearbook, because they were writing things to me that I couldn't share with their parents.
Oh, sure.
Things were it was a really neat thing. I love that. So anyhow, 100% digital came in, and there's no one that's teaching wet lab. I guess they still teach a little bit of wet lab, but I went to Phoenix College. I entered one of my pieces and it got an award. So I went to the meeting where they fed everybody. And then I saw the staff of the college all gathered. So I went over there and I asked them, I said, what percentage of photography do you devote to film? They looked at each other, they snickered, and they went, absolutely none. It's 100%
film?
digital. We teach film like we used to teach tintypes and glass plates. That's just the way we used to do things. But anyhow, that's the photography part. So I sponsored yearbooks for 23 years. The lifespan is usually 5 years, but I stuck it out. And where we used to submit our deadlines with a typewriter, you would type a certain distance. You would take the grease pencil. You would crop the picture. And then it was elite. And then we went to a computer, that 2G, guess what? It had text wrap. And you could even change the font. You had like 3 different fonts, And so anyhow, Tim Langan, did you know him?
That doesn't
Mr.
sound
Langan.
familiar.
Anyhow, he taught keyboarding. And as a joke, I went into his classroom with a Royal typewriter in a case. And he went right along with me. He goes, hey, okay, turn over your mouse, because keyboarding, it was all computerized. And we have a guest lecturer today, Mr. Hildreth, and he's going to talk to you. And I went, hey, this is great. I went, what is this? They didn't know. I took it out. They didn't know. Here's the Royal typewriter. And I started telling them that this has one font.
Yep.
And it has one size. And when you get to the end and hear this, bing, you have to take it back to the beginning. And they went, no, wait. We talked 45 minutes and it was very educational. And I meant it for a joke,
And suddenly you were doing a history lesson.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so amazing. Well, something you said that right there, I think, is a great point to pivot, where you talked about how these students that were writing journals and you were seeing things that they couldn't even share with their parents. That's definitely a place where I would like to dive in with you, because you were so much more than just a teacher. I learned plenty from you. I can absolutely attribute so much of what I do to this day to things that I learned in your classes, in photography classes and in yearbook, beyond just framing and focus, that I attribute to your approachability. And I saw that in my classmates, and that I knew that anybody that had been in Hildreth's class for anything would probably say something very similar. What was it for you, that relatability to your students, that it wasn't just some I'm the superior, I'm the teacher, and you are the lowly student, and you will just listen and you will do what I say. There was so much more to it. Can you quantify what that meant to you?
My dad, as I grew up, didn't talk to me like dad to son. When I became at the age that he could communicate on an adult level, he would do that. He wouldn't raise his voice. He would explain, and he treated me like an adult. And as he gave me responsibilities, and as I proved that I could, meet those responsibilities, he gave me more responsibility, kind of like in a Christian walk, with Christ. Anyhow, my students, if they acted adult, I treated them like an adult. And if they acted like a kid, I wouldn't try to embarrass them before their peers, but I would take them out in a hallway and I would calmly discuss why you don't realize this, but you are undermining what the other students are trying to learn. And let me explain. And then I would try to explain that to them. But I have been told many times that, Mr. H, for some reason, you can yell at me or yell at us without raising your voice. How do you do that? In other words, the meaning came from the heart, and the change that I wanted to see in a person came from my heart. And they knew that I believed that they could make that change. And if they would, they wouldn't just please me, but they would be helping themselves out in a changed life as well.
Right. Well, and again, maybe to have to dive a little bit further back, was faith always a part of your life, that it just came out in who you were?
Okay. Let's go way back. My great grandpa was a pastor. Okay. And then my grandfather was a pastor. My mom is a preacher's kid. And I had this, but I did grow into that place where I realized that my faith and my being a Christian wasn't going to be what my grandfathers, what my heritage did. I had the legacy, but my spirituality and my faith had to be individual. And I had to make that personal between me and my Savior. And I did that. And even in high school, I didn't ever tell you this, but going through Peoria High School, that's where I went. That's where I taught, later, 4 years later. And I think you told me, welcome back, Carter, whatever. And, but they would apologize if they cussed in my presence. And I was invited to all of the parties because I guess I was a fun person, but yet I never went. Even Mrs. Williamson, my English teacher, your English teacher, she says, Ron, you are a social entity of school. You need to go to the dances. Well, I was attending a very legalistic church that didn't believe in dancing at all. And I did go and sneak to one, and I invented what I called the Panther Hop. And I taught all my buddies to do the Panther Hop. And we did that. I mean, anyhow, so the legal, I could get into that. But I went to college, and I went, wait a minute. Well, let's back up. In high school, I led the state of Arizona in yardage football. I had letters from Ohio State and the U of A, but I got hurt really bad. It set me in the hospital for a month. I lost 40 pounds. I didn't get the All-Star game. I didn't do that. So I went to a Christian college, and I'm thinking, man, am I programmed? I mean, because of who I am in this family with this heritage of preachers, am I just programmed? Is this all real? I had doubts. And so I'm not that smart, God knows that. But I took my Bible and car and I drove to the end of a road. Then I climbed to the top of a mountain and I sat on some rocks. And I don't even know about the Bible, what I read, but I looked out at God's creation. And I'm starting to get blessed right here because I looked out and God proved to me through his creation that he exists, that he's real, and that he's real in my life. Unequivocally, I knew that God is. So then I started going back to classes. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was in college, same college, and I was going to be a dentist. But then again, I couldn't pass chemistry because my teacher he worked for the Dow Chemical Company, and he invented cellophane.
Wow.
Yeah, this goes back. If people are listening to this, they won't know what we're talking about. Slide rules. But I was fancy. I had a circular slide rule. They're balancing molecular equations. And okay, I'm not going to be a dentist. So then I'm walking on a heart. The heart was a cement little thing that's shaped like a heart in front of the mansion. The old mansion turned into the music building where I taught myself how to play piano. And I'm walking down, and I had been praying, just like for a future wife. I've been praying, what do you want me to do, God? And if you want me to be a preacher, I guess I can, And then I could show you right now, I could take you to the place where I stopped in my tracks in that spot on the heart. And I'm not saying it was a voice from God, but it was a thought that came in so strong from the inside out. It says, be a teacher. And I went, where have you been, Ron? You loved high school. I would go sick. I always showed up. It didn't matter. I would go to high school. I loved it. And I went, yeah, go back to the classroom. I know all those things they're trying to pull on teachers because that's where I was, And so I never looked back. I never got tired. It was always exciting for me. It wasn't like I was going to work ever, as you may remember. It was just fun in the classroom. It was fun with the camaraderie I had with faculty. And just looking back, I see that God answers prayer. He does hear when we ask. He's not like that genie we rub and he comes out and gives us things. But if we say, God, I need you, and this is why I need you and how I need you, he's going to be there and he will answer those prayers.
Yeah. Well, and as a 14-year-old goofy kid, I can remember all through my 4 years in high school, I had some kind of a photography class in all 4 years with you that faith was just always who you were, but you weren't a soapboxy guy. You weren't a hellfire and brimstone kind of a guy. There was just a joy to who you were. And there was your faith was real. And that's definitely part of why I can say now with full conviction that you had a profound effect on my life, that I am so thankful for the voice that you had in my life back in those formative years, that maybe took me a little while to have a full realization of, but I can say that today with full clarity. And I so appreciate that that's who you were, that you didn't have to put on airs, and you didn't shy away from it. It was just who you were. Is that something you had to set your mind to, or was it just a natural thing for you?
I would say it was a natural thing because God is real. And he is Watchman Nee wrote a book, The Normal Christian Life. Of course, Christ is the only normal Christian that has ever lived on earth, but it was a way of life. It wasn't a weekend thing. It was a daily thing. It was a part of me. And I thought, hey, Christ says, I have come to give you not just life, but that you can have it more abundantly. So why can't we have fun and enjoy life and go through life and share that with others and be optimistic and hopeful and with the joy? I mean, that doesn't mean I didn't play a few nice tricks on some of my colleagues, But,
well, and some of us kids too.
But I met a guy at that college. He was an evangelist. And he was a student evangelist. We'd go out on weekends and he would preach. And then there would be singing groups. And I would go with him on weekends to all kinds of different towns. And he got in high school, Coolidge High School, he was voted the most witty. Okay. And in his sermons he was, and in life he was. And I went, see there, you can have fun. You can be a Christian. You can live for Christ and you don't have to give up anything. And if I can be that way, and if students or other people can see that in me, then good, because Christ is the way, the only way. If you want true happiness, it's with Christ. It's not with any substitute.
Well, and by chance, did you ever get any flack or blowback from that at all? And I can only imagine what a teacher in this day and age might have to contend with if they were at all out front with their faith. But did you ever get any friction from peers or even students for that matter in all your time?
Well, I started a club called the Clock Club. I don't remember that.
Yep. Christian Life on Campus.
Christian Life on Campus. Okay. I remember this. Hey, go to all these club meetings and find out what club you might be interested in. I remember this kid came in because he liked clocks. He goes, "What is this? What's going on here? Don't you deal with clocks?" And I went, "Well, it stands for Christian Life on Campus." And Donna Burns was the president of that.
Oh, Donna Burns.
And we would have our meetings, and we even sang at Christmas, a Dallas Holmes song called Holiday and Christmas Song. And I played the piano, and our Christian group sang. But as I went to change from Peoria High to another school, it was changed, and they stopped having any Christian clubs on campus. So I went to the principal and I asked why. And he says, because if you allow this Christian club, we're going to have the Muslim club and the Buddhist club and all of these other clubs to give equal time. And we don't want to do that. So that's when the Fellowship of Christian Athletes came in, and they would meet off campus, but, they would advertise on campus.
Right.
And some of those things. So then we had volunteer kids that would just do that.
Okay.
So yeah, we had to stop after a time. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. One item I want to address specifically, and I'm going to assume that you recall, my sophomore year, we did the annual trek up to Sedona, where you always took us up to West Fork to get all of our, we had all of our assignments that you gave us as far as the different kinds of pictures that we had to turn in. I was always kind of amazed, especially, and that was only my second year with you, but the level of trust that you would take, I forget how many of us, when you consider that was 4 or 5 periods worth of kids, or however many would fit on one bus, but that you would just take us up to West Fork and turn us loose and say, all right, be back here at 3:00 or whatever your frame was. Well, me and 2 older students took entirely too much advantage of that. And one of the older guys was able to procure some alcohol. And we knew that we would have time on the trail away from you and away from everybody else to consume said alcohol. And we got back to the bus and everything was fine. And I remember being sadly, very inebriated, and it definitely showed in my eyes. And everybody was back on the bus, and you were taking a walk towards the back to basically just do a head count, make sure everybody was there and everybody was okay. And one of those older guys saw that my eyes just looked blotto, threw their sunglasses at me, and just told me to try to sit upright while you came and did your quick inspection, and everything was fine. And we got back to school, and I'm thinking, all right, well, we got away with that, except that about a week later, you pulled me out of class as our class period was just beginning, and you pulled me out in the hallway and you said, somebody told me that you may have been drinking on the trip up to Sedona. Is that true or not? And I knew in that moment that I had to cop to it to some degree. And I remember thinking, oh, this is Mr. Hildreth. I'll admit it, and everything will be fine. There will be no penalty. And I remember just so stupidly holding up a very small measurement with my thumb and forefinger and saying, only this much. And you just looked at me and kind of nodded for a second, and you said, okay, appreciate your honesty. And again, I was thinking, wow, I guess that's it. No. The next morning, I was in my first hour of class, and I get paged to come to the front office. And I found that I had a special appointment with then, what was his role? Assistant Principal Bobby Gonzalo. And he says, do you know what you're in here for? And I said, not exactly. What's the deal? And he says, well, let me read this to you. And what's funny, you say you can see me, right?
Yeah.
I will tell you that form is not in front of me anywhere, but I can tell you exactly what it said. It says, Stephen consumed alcohol while on the photo field trip. While I did not notice any change in his behavior, he violated my trust. And my heart sank in that moment that, wow, I have apparently underestimated Mr. Hildreth. And I'm definitely on the hook for this. And Mr. Gonzalo just looked at me with full-on, straight-up pragmatic facts. He says, do you know what this means? And I said, no. And he said, that's an automatic suspension.
Wow.
Okay. I said, and that was a Wednesday. And I said, so how does this work? And he says, well, I'm going to call your folks right now. Somebody's going to have to come and get you. You can't come anywhere near this school until next Monday. Okay. Well, he called my mom. Either my mom or my dad could come and get me. So I had to sit there in the office for the remainder of the day. And then I couldn't go to the football game Friday night. I couldn't have anything to do with anything at the school for that time. I made the mistake of assuming your kindness was a weakness. And what I learned in that moment was your kindness was actually your strength. And even though it would take me years to realize that, I am so grateful. And maybe that's the joy of getting older and maybe even wiser, that I can say that with the same full clarity, that I am so glad that you did not let me off the hook for that. I did not do well with alcohol for the remainder of my high school time. I can say that with full clarity now as well. But I can also say, just having surpassed 36 years of sobriety, that I will never forget that moment in the hallway with you, that moment in the hallway in the attendance office being told and it wasn't even so much kind of the legalistic aspect of it, but that line on the referral form that said that I had violated your trust. That to me was the most crushing thing, because I had already gained such a respect for you that I knew in that moment that I would never violate that trust again, as far as I had any power to do so. I can't imagine that I was the only student in all of your time that might have this kind of story, where you were not only teacher, you were not only confidant, but that you also had to be a bit of a disciplinarian. But you were never harsh about it. You were never pointing a heavy finger about it. And I want you to hear it from me, how much I appreciate and how grateful I am that you took me to task over something like that and didn't just wash over it.
You put a smile on my face. But you were a sophomore at that time.
Correct.
And you stayed in my class for 2 more years. So my question to you would be, did I give you opportunity to gain my trust again?
Oh,
and the answer you would have to give. It was
every
yes.
bit.
Yes. Because I gave you responsibilities. You were the leader in yearbook. We had our overnighters at the Grand Canyon. Remember that one?
Yep.
And so one thing, and I have to say about me, and it might be a God's gift, but I would see a kid and I go, man, I know I gave him a swat last week.
Yeah.
I just couldn't remember why. I'm going, well, why did I hit that kid? I can't remember. In other words, I didn't hold a grudge. I forgave, and I gave you opportunity to earn my trust back, and you definitely did that. And that's, in our relationship with Christ, he disciplines those he loves.
Yeah.
And we have to react that way. And we know he loves us. And when we repent, that his grace is so good that, anyhow, we could go there, but.
Yep.
But
it's funny you say that too, because I know that you gave me a swat at least once, and that may sound completely foreign to some of my listeners, but way back in the day, it was not uncommon for us clowns to get hauled out into the hallway and given a good rap on the backside.
Another teacher for a witness, like Tony Gonzalo.
Exactly.
And on my room, if you remember, there were a student's feet were traced with permanent marker, and right in the middle of those feet, the launch pad.
Yes.
That's right.
Well, wait a minute. Didn't you have a name for your paddle too? Like Lucille or?
Yeah, but I can't remember exactly. But when I went to high school, my shop teacher, Joe Hunter, he had the launch pad, and I got plenty of swats right there. So I just carried it on,
What a lineage.
I'll tell you, my daughter, Ronnie, the younger one, she stole my car and took a bunch of her classmates her sophomore year to McDonald's and came back, and I found out about it. And actually, the principals and assistant principals were talking, and they thought Hildreth is just going to let her off because she's his kid. No way. I gave her a referral. She was suspended. My daughter was suspended. She goes, "Dad, how could you do that?" And I says, it was your decision. You did something wrong. It's against the rules. You should know better, and you're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
But here's the bad thing, and I had to get over this. I'll tell you what. This kid at the beginning of school, first day, I'm going through syllabus, and this kid comes in, and he had really long hair, and he had a black shirt, and I didn't know exactly what it said. But in my mind, as I'm talking to all the class, you have these little groups. You have the jocks, and you have the smart ones, you call them nerds, and you have the cheerleaders and the student council people, and you have the singers and the actors, and you have all these different groups. And I thought, oh, here's a heavy metal bad guy. And then after class, he stayed. He was the last one to leave. He came up to me and he said, Mr. H, I just want you to know that I took this class because I heard you're a Christian, and I just want to be under your influence. Man, wow. There's me melting right there in my teacher's chair, the one who's supposed to know. And I went, well, my pleasure. And I'm still kind of, faking my attitude. And as he turns around, I could read his shirt, and is putting Christ first. It was so good. He was a great student. And that brings me to, how we label people, or in this, I was raised in a legalistic kind of religious environment. And I took, I was under this pastor that was preaching verse by verse, and it took us a year to get through 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. One of his sermons was, it's Jesus plus nothing. It's not Jesus plus your short hair, you can't have long hair. It wasn't Jesus plus wear a tie. It wasn't Jesus plus you have to wear a tuck in your shirt. Or it's not Jesus and you can't wear shorts or, flip-flops to church. It was Jesus plus nothing, because what he did on the cross was for us, regardless of how we look, and that was good for me because of anybody, to stop judging and putting on that pretense. Yep.
Well, and it's you're even just telling that story, you're hearkening me back to even just thinking about what an odd mixed bag of students that you always seem to have, that it wasn't just the jocks. It wasn't just, one of these and two of, it was, I'm just thinking back to some of the people that, that having a photography class with them was the only times that my path ever crossed theirs. And because we did come from such, diversity, so to speak, and yet there was this amazing unified thing in what you were teaching us and the way that you taught it. And I think it was even more so than just the, kind of the X's and O's and the mechanics of it, but that you were able to help us appreciate the art in it, and not just the art of photography, but the art that having to sit in that room for, 45 minutes that it would take to actually go through all the steps of, I think about rolling up undeveloped film on those long plastic, what did you call those things?
Yeah. Who knows these days?
We had to roll it up in
reels, developing reels.
Yeah, and put a rubber band around it, and you couldn't turn the lights on until you had the thing completely sealed, and then it was only the red light.
Yep.
that even just understanding that the process was just as important as what you finally delivered at the end, and that your critiques of our art was never a harsh thing. It was, I like what you did here. What you might think about the next time would be that you were always giving us ways to improve upon it and not just saying, sorry, you did that wrong. I never felt like what I was trying to capture it was never a right or wrong thing. It was the encouragement to find our own flavor of art or take on the art, and the way that you would always open that up to the class to offer constructive feedback. It was just always such a great atmosphere, not to mention the fun that your class was. I just appreciate how you taught and you celebrated. That nobody ever felt inferior, because, as the case was back then, you could have a beginning photography student in with somebody who's been doing it for 3 years. And yet there was always a collaborative spirit. It was always a constructive spirit. And I could just ramble and ramble and ramble about all I feel like I learned under your tutelage. That it was, as this podcast was coming together, it was like, okay, I don't know what that looks like yet, but I got to get Hildreth on here, because I hope that we can have exactly the conversation as it has panned out here. And I so appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your heart, and I will always appreciate who you were to me back in the day, because I can honestly say that I'm still living some of that out to this day.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's an honor, and I thank you for sharing that with me. When I was asking God, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to be a preacher or what? No, he wanted me in a classroom. And he gave me an influence, to teachers as well as to students through the years. And I give God all the glory for that. And I want to thank you for this time.
I love words, and yet I feel like I can't quite find the right ones to sum up how I feel after reconnecting with that man who I respect so much. I know we all hear about being more grateful, so much so that it just blends in with all the other noise in our lives. It's a decision, or maybe it's even more realistic to call it a discipline. We have to train ourselves to be more thankful. Always be ready to look people in the eye and say thank you like you mean it. Colossians 2:6-7 says, just as you received Christ Jesus as Lord, continue to live your lives in Him, rooted and built up in Him, strengthened in the faith as you were taught, and overflowing with thankfulness. Overflowing stands out to me there. That takes effort, and it's something I know that I want to work on. I've got a link in the show notes for Ron's website if you'd like to see some of his beautiful photography. And while you're in the show notes, check for the links to the Nook Facebook page and my social media feeds if you'd like to follow along. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you here next time in the Nook. The Nook Podcast is a production of Sozo Digital Media.